Well, the massacre in Kenya comes as world leaders gather at the United Nations General Assembly to discuss other emergency issues, and there are plenty of them. President Obama just arrived in New York City for what is shaping up to be a crucial week for American diplomacy. At the top of the agenda, working with Russia to get Syria to hand over its chemical weapons and trying to keep Tehran's nuclear ambitions in check. Is it possible? Fox News contributor John Bolton, is former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, joins us now live. Good to see you, Ambassador.
Glad to be here.
All right, so let's start with Iran. Of course, as the days tick by, there are increased warnings from Israel, from others, that they are that much closer to a nuclear program. And there's been discussion that the president may meet with Iran's new president. Good idea, bad idea?
Well, it's a very bad idea. Look, what's going on now is that Hassan Rouhani is engaged in an international charm offensive. Iran wants relief from the international economic sanctions, which have hurt the country. Those sanctions have not affected its nuclear weapons program, and there's no possibility, I think, that Iran is going to be negotiated out of that program. But negotiations could bring relief from the sanctions and therefore alleviate the pressure and the threat of an Israeli military strike. Now, in terms of the president meeting Rouhani, look, Iran is still a designated state sponsor of terrorism. And that means Rouhani is running a mechanism that aids terrorists all around the world. He may not set off the explosives in terrorist attacks, but he's funding the explosives. That makes him the functional equivalent of a terrorist. And I don't think the President of the United States ought to shake hands with a terrorist, period, close quote.
Do you think that it gains some legitimacy for Rouhani if the president does agree to sit down with him? Does it increase his stature in the international market where people are watching very closely to see whether the U.S. agrees to have a friendly chat, to have any kind of discussion or relationship with them?
Right. Now, I think it's a big plus for Rouhani. What it gets for Obama is beyond me. The Europeans are dying to get into a negotiation with Iran. And if we participate in it, it will give Iran additional legitimacy, and it will give them additional time to continue their nuclear weapons program. It will allow President Obama to pressure Israel not to engage in a military strike while there's a diplomatic process going on. And obviously, Rouhani hopes to get relief from the sanctions. So from Iran's point of view, there's no downside to this at all. From our point of view, it simply allows Iran space to continue towards a nuclear weapons capability.
What do you expect from Israel this week?
Well, I think Prime Minister Netanyahu will continue his series of speeches warning about the Iranian nuclear threat. It is an existential issue for Israel, but I can tell you, having just come back from a week in the Persian Gulf, many Arab friends of the United States are just as worried as Israel is about an Iranian nuclear weapon. If they get a nuclear weapon, it won't stop there. Saudi Arabia will respond, Egypt, Turkey, perhaps others. That's why stopping Iran is so important, because proliferation around the region will take someplace that's already volatile and make it even more dangerous.
And, of course, Syria is still on the table there. Russia pushing back against a lot of efforts that the U.S. and others are trying to make in resolving the situation as best they can at this point. We've got this, tentative agreement that they're going to turn over their stockpiles. They're going to be destroyed, chemical weapons. How critical will that conversation be this week here in New York?
I don't think there's going to be much progress one way or the other on Syria. I think the deal that was announced in Geneva is a cosmetic solution for President Obama more than anybody else. Even if you could imagine a circumstance where all of Syria's chemical weapons would be destroyed in a very short period of time, they could simply get more chemical weapons from Russia, which has been violating the Chemical Weapons Convention since it entered into force almost 20 years ago, or from Iran, which is a party to the CWC, but which has also been violating it happily, as has North Korea. So this really, this agreement had the consequence of buying time for the Bashar al-Assad regime, which is what they needed militarily inside Syria.
So how do we look on the world stage then? I mean, we've threatened potential strikes of some kind there in Syria. Then Russia comes in and says, oh, no, we've got this agreement. And we go along with it, essentially saying, yes, that looks legitimate. It's a good solution. It's diplomatic. That's what we'll do. If you're saying it has no teeth, does the rest of the world view it that way? Do they look at us as if we're foolish?
I think we look weak. I think we look like we don't have our act together, like we're indecisive. And I attribute that to the president's actions. That's another reason why, if I were Hassan Rouhani, I would be focusing on some encounter with President Obama to launch these negotiations. Remember, Rouhani was Iran's chief nuclear negotiator 10 years ago, and he followed the same playbook then of buying time for Iran's nuclear program to move closer to success. I think he's going to do the same thing here.
Is he, though, essentially truly calling the shots in Iran? We always hear so much about how the religious leaders there are truly the most powerful ones. Where does he stand in that hierarchy as, actually speaking for the country and their policies?
Well, he certainly speaks for the country, but he's below the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, and it's important to recognize that the nuclear weapons program, the military aspect of Iran's nuclear efforts, is controlled by the Revolutionary Guards Corps, which reports directly to the supreme leader. The only way you can characterize Hassan Rouhani as a moderate is that he doesn't openly boast of the nuclear program. He doesn't proclaim that Israel should be driven into the sea. He smiles a lot, and that makes him a moderate compared to Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. On the single most important issue, which is Iran's 20-year-long effort to get nuclear weapons, there's not a dime's worth of difference between them.
I guess it's all relative.
Well, in this case, there's not much even that's relative. They want nuclear weapons. They're getting closer and closer. They're building a broad and deep nuclear infrastructure, and negotiation is not going to change that.
Well, we'll watch the speeches, primarily the president's, and see what he has to say about this as well this week. Ambassador, always good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.